Yuri, thank you so much for talking to me once again. We're doing a back-to-back interview here coming off of the back of Phase Zero. It's very good to have you here. Let's dive into Spider-Man 2. Obviously, the day this is going out, people are now playing the game, which I am sure is a sigh of relief for you in some ways. I'm sure it's been a long road to get to this point. I guess my first question for you, though, is how early did you know that Insomniac was going to do Spider-Man 2, and how early did you know that it was going to center entirely around the Black Suit storyline? Because I know, if I'm correct, Brian Intihar was talking about after the release of the last game that was really what he wanted to do next. So I have a feeling that you've kind of known this was in the pipeline for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, it all blends together. And so I don't remember the day. If it felt like we were, well, I mean, we did work on both games for about 3 years each. So time gets kind of funny. And of course we had the pandemic in the middle of it, which, has skewed time, into a flat circle anyway. But we finished the first game, we went to the DLC, but I don't think it was right away. I mean, Brian may have known. He's like, hey, we want to do another one and it's going to be this. But I didn't know that right away. I had hoped there'd been rumblings that we would do another one. And then, when it hit and people really liked it, I'm like, well, we're definitely doing another one. But I didn't know that it was going to be a symbiote story right away. But I don't remember exactly when that happened. I don't remember exactly when that came up. I'm sure fairly soon after that.
Yeah.
And then John Paquette, who was the main writer on the first one, didn't do a lot on the second one as well. I think he sent me just sort of a breakdown of the story as they had it in their heads right then. It's changed a lot since that first sort of outline he sent me, but he did send that to me, and it was super exciting right off the bat. But
well, that's what I was going to ask you next is, was there any sort of, apprehension going to play a version of Peter Parker this time around that is going to be totally different from the first game, or is that almost that much more exciting for you that you get to explore something completely different and completely much more nuanced and complicated this time, angsty even? like what was your approach this time, and how were you feeling coming into this?
I mean, absolutely exciting. You ask any actor, would they rather play a villain or a hero? And they, villain, and just because it allows you, it gives you the freedom to be bad with no consequences, to experiment with the dark side and not have, social fallout from that, and not to, be able to not sleep at night. So it was really exciting to know that I would get to, take Peter into that universe. But I was unaware at how difficult that would be when we started doing it. Because here's the thing. He's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I'm sure one of the reasons I got cast is because I'm your friendly neighborhood, guy. Like I'm just a nice guy. And it was hard to make Peter not that, because I've gotten into this groove of what he is. And to make him mean and not care about his friends, and to be actively undermining them, and then for it to get even worse, left me frankly exhausted at the end of every day. I mean, the sessions are, because we record several different versions of lines, and sometimes it's physically exerted, and so we put a lot of swinging into the line, and then we get the wingsuit version, and so you've got your wingsuit versions of the the line, and so it was, I'm exhausted normally, but I was like psychically exhausted. Like I felt like wiped out, like I had a flu sometimes, like at the end of a day of recording Pete as Mean Pete, because it required such a shift, psychologically.
Well, this kind of leads naturally into my next question. Sorry to cut you off, but did you develop any specific strategies that kind of helped you tap into that anger and angst that you have to express as Peter in this manner?
I worked really hard with the performance director, with Chris Zimmerman, and she was always on top of that. If I wasn't enough of that, or if I was too much of that for where Peter is in his whole arc of living with the symbiote. Living with the symbiote sounds like a new sitcom that a spinoff for which if you've ever they came out with a couple of 4-issue things of Spider-Man that are very, sort of like kid friendly. And that's why I know about them, because I got them for my kid. But it's Spider-Man and Venom are roommates, and it's hilarious. But it was a tough transition. I never like came up with a thing that I could be like, okay, concentrate on this, and now I'm symbiote Pete. It was just a matter of remembering where he's coming from, that and where his focus is. Pete is always worried about and thinking about the people around him, all his friends, every citizen of New York City and beyond. And this shift mostly comes with, now he's just thinking about himself, which is hard for Pete. And hard for me to just become just completely selfish about everything. And to not care whether anybody else gets hurt, or whether anybody else gets what they want, or whether anybody else likes me anymore. So I guess it was just shifting that focus, the intent to everybody else to just me.
I think one of my favorite things about the symbiote storyline, and kind of how it's been expressed in different mediums over the years, is that the symbiote enhances Peter's personality traits in a way that almost makes him kind of goofy, or expresses what he thinks is sort of like, because he is such a good-natured person that when he does act out, it's almost kind of like off-putting, but in a funny way. Again, I think of Toby dancing in Spider-Man 3,
sure.
Or we talked about this in the previous interview, the shocker, like the screams from, like there is an inherent silliness kind of to it. And I'm curious, in your own experience, were you tempted to sort of ham it up at any point? Again, one of the previous gameplay trailers from earlier this year, I know, was kind of had like teases of that, where it's like, oh, well, I have big teeth too. And it's like, that's kind of a silly line, Peter. Okay. But
yeah, it could very easily tend, in that direction. And I think they were very careful about not letting me go there, or if my performance was going there, to bring it back. The edict for this game, and I don't mean this in as any sort of criticism, the edict that always, in the direction that I got most of all, is less funny, like, which is hard, as Spider-Man. But anytime we got, that was going to be, that they wanted a shift of tone in this game. And while Spider-Man is still Spider-Man, and there's still a lot of humor in this game because it's integral to that world and who he is less, as a character, less jokey and less quippy a lot of the time. So anytime I would sort of ad-lib something, or and I was too far down the symbiote rabbit hole, they would bring me back, and they'd be like, you know what, not funny. Remember, less funny. Less funny. My reads are naturally quippy on a lot of things, and as the symbiote, it had to be less so. So less funny was the edict on this game, and I got that direction a lot.
I'm still hoping there's some dance moves or something like that, and there is Easter eggs, just for, not in the cutscenes necessarily, but things around the world. You could activate this prompt, and you can do the classic Spider-Man dance or something like that. So
that's why I did the dance at Comic-Con, because everybody wanted that.
It's been so,
and I kind of wanted that too.
I've loved seeing how that has just turned on its head the past 15 years or so. It's been so great. Yeah. I think the interesting thing about Spider-Man 2 this time around is some of your co-leads. Obviously, you've worked with Nadji Jeter last time around in the previous game, but he is one of the titular Spider-Men in this Spider-Man game now. Yeah. What was it like? I guess, generally speaking, how closely do you work with the other actors on these projects? And specifically with Miles, what was it like working with Nadji and kind of developing the evolving relationship between him and Peter this time around?
Well, Nadji and I have this interesting relationship, in that our relationship in the game is, has a lot of the flavor of our relationship in real life. He's much younger than me. He's been doing this for, less time. We sort of came together, and I was able to, not that I ever, went to him and said, hey, let me teach you how to do this. But just as, naturally, as we were working together, it became sort of this big brother, little brother relationship in real life, as well as, kind of what happens in the game. Now, the cool thing about, I mean, a lot of the recording, we do solo, a lot of the gameplay stuff, a lot of the quips, a lot of, the in-world stuff, but all the cinematics we get to shoot together. So we are working very closely together, and I think it's why you get the performances you get, why that scene where in the first game where I'm teaching him to fight is so good. Why, what the Doc Ock, scene in that game, because Bill was right there. The intensity of the relationship. See, like the game's out now and I'm still afraid of like spoiling too much, but the intensity in the conflict between Miles and Peter in this, when Miles realizes that Pete is too far gone, with the symbiote, that we get to, because we were in the room together, shooting the cinematics, we really get to bounce off each other. So it really is a joint thing. We really do work very closely together in that respect. And we have this cool relationship outside of the game too, which kind of mirrors the in-game relationship, and I think has will occasionally lead to little things happening in the game that weren't necessarily in the writing, but are just kind of pop up naturally.
Yeah, I think the thing that has excited me the most in the lead up to this game is kind of what you mentioned before. Like, every other version of the symbiote storyline that we've seen for the most part has been a version of the story where Peter is kind of isolated and he has to kind of get through this himself. And this Insomniac's world is different because Miles sees his changes and realizes he has to assist him and help him get through this dark period that he's going through. And that's been, I've been so excited to see how it plays out in the game, because I've known that Insomniac's going to do wonderful things there.
And again, similar but different. A lot of that stuff that you're looking for in a story like this, a Spider-Man, symbiote story, you get, but slightly different, because you nailed it. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. It's because usually it's an isolated thing for him. It's a solo thing, and this time there's fallout and relationships. Yeah. Outside of Najee, the person that fans have been the most excited about seeing in this game, I think, since its announcement, has been Tony Todd as Venom. Insomniac has been very upfront about showing off Venom in this game compared to the last game, which I have found to be greatly interesting, because no one knew Doc Ock or Otto Octavius was even in it until it was out. And this time around, they're just like, nope, here's Venom. He's in the game, which I guess you kind of have to do if you're going to tell this story. Sure. How closely did you get to work with Tony Todd, and was his performance as intimidating in person as it comes across in the game? I'll tell you, Tony is the best. I was a fan before I met him and got a chance to work with him. I actually, in a strange turn of events, I worked with him on a show called Dota 2 Dragon's Blood on Netflix, where we have sort of a similar relationship that we ended up having in this. And he was cast totally without any of my help, as usual. I mean, that guy's a genius. I mean, he's super giving as an actor. And of course, the first time I met him, I was super intimidated, because like I knew that guy as, Candyman. I knew that guy from X-Files. I knew him from, like from so many things that he's got an aura about him. Yeah. But he's so like gentle and cool and like giving, as a performer and as a human being. When you start working with him, the intimidation factor, drops in a good way, because he definitely turns it on, as when he's working. But we got to work together for some of it, but not for as much as I would have wanted to. Maybe I'm just, projecting like, well, I would have wanted to work with him all the time, in every session, every day. But we did get to do some, we had some scenes or some, moments on the PCAP stage together where we were physically, there together. And then sometimes, even though we were solo recording in the booth, because they wanted some of what I would say to mirror what he says, speaking, as the symbiote, they would play me his dialogue, and then I would, for timing purposes, so that I would be, so it was kind of like he was there with me even when he wasn't. But I love that we've become friends, over the course of the last two projects, and I love Tony dearly. He's the best.
Tony's performance in this game, I mean, nothing against yourself or Naji, I think is probably going to be the one that steals the show. I mean, everybody's just so in love with Venom and has been wanting to see Venom in this universe. So I have a feeling that's going to be one of the big takeaways that people have after having played this for yourself.
Yeah, because that's what everybody's tuning in for. They're like, we want a Venom game. Oh, you're giving us a Venom game? Okay, we want it to be perfect. So
yeah. Well, this is just the way of superhero storytelling, I think, too. Once you kind of tell the origin story, the sequels is always like, okay, cool, but what's the villain? Like, that's always the big question that people have. I think the thing I find most interesting about you and your career is that you've played Spider-Man, obviously, in these games, but in other mediums and in other games. Last year, you played Spider-Man in Marvel's Midnight Suns, if I'm correct, as well. Do you change your approach at all when bouncing to different projects? Does it just depend on like the direction that you're getting for the character? Or are you very much brought in at this point, like, nope, we know you play Spider-Man, just do the Spider-Man thing at this point?
Well, I've actually taken great pains to differentiate Spider-Mans that I do in other projects. They have a different flavor. I mean, they'll inevitably have a different flavor because it's a project, it's a different team, it's different writing, it's a different kind of game. But I did want it to be clear that, when I'm Insomniac Spider-Man, he is a different Spider-Man than like Midnight Sun Spider-Man. Midnight Sun Spider-Man is a younger, quippier, less confident Spider-Man, but no less Spider-Man. And the writing was so good. It was so funny. The stuff that they came up with in Midnight Suns would always have us rolling in the booth. But I like to, I mean, the core of my Spider-Man will always be there just because it's me doing it. But I do like to give a different flavor to different Spider-Man projects. And, I'm lucky enough at this point that I've gotten to do a couple.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a great job in all of them. So I've always been fascinated about that. Again, the game is out today. I'm curious. We're trying to duck and weave around spoilers here and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's a lot you would want to say in response to this question. But I guess what just excites you the most about the story, and what is maybe the thing within this game that you are most excited to see fans talk about once they start beating it here within the next couple of days and weeks?
Yeah. Well, I know everybody's going to tune in for something different. Everybody's going to pick up that controller and want something different out of the game. But I think people are excited to see Venom. They're excited to see, the symbiote and Pete, with the symbiote suit and being affected by it. And I would just hope that they're happy with it. Because people have very specific opinions about Venom and what they want from that. So I just hope that they get at least some of what they want. We can't read the future and know whatever, dial it in for every single person. But we hope that experience that people are looking for, in this game is there for you. I'm also excited to see how, because, the first game was Pete, and, the Miles game was Miles, and this is Pete and Miles. And we learn more, about other characters like, Harry. And the relationship between, Pete and MJ changes. And so I'm hoping that people, get what they're looking for, but are also surprised by, a bunch of other things. And I know the game's out. I know I could spoil some things now, but I know probably it'll take a little time for people to play it. So I don't want to, talk too much about it. But I hope it, and I hope, a lot of people talk, from the first game, they're like, oh, there were these scenes that were super intense, and, like I cried when I was playing them for the fifth time still, and I'm hoping that you have similar moments from this game. I'm hoping that we can do that to you again, but in a different way.
We're kind of talking here about what's next and the ending of the game and the future, and it seems like this is, let's be honest, this is like one of the best-selling PlayStation games of all time. It seems like this is going to be a tentpole moving forward. People want a third game. I assume you have aspirations to do a third game. Speaking purely as a fan, what type of storyline would you like to see Insomniac take on next if another game does happen? Do you have any favorite Spider-Man stories from any various mediums, whether it be comics or film or anything like that, that you would like to see Insomniac kind of use as a template if another game does happen here?
I'm not landing on a specific storyline.
You want to do one more day? We could reboot the whole universe and go back to the start here.
Exactly. No reboots at this point, please. But there's so many ways they could go with a third game, and I'm assuming at this point, like, nobody's had me sign a contract for a third game, but I'm assuming there will be a third game. Look, here's something I've been pitching for a long time, and I don't know if they're gonna do it, but I love the Spidey Pool relationship. Like, I love Deadpool and Spider-Man, and much as I talk about Moon Knight in this universe, and Brian Intar is tired of me talking about that. I've been hard pitching, like, wouldn't it be great if Nolan North and me got to play in that, and so I would love to see that. I'd love to see Deadpool and Spidey in this. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Do they listen to me? Mostly not. But that is a relationship I would love to see explored in games.
You have more influence than I do, so keep poking them with that. If nothing else, maybe we can get a Marvel team up game or something like that. Again, there's a Wolverine game obviously happening. Let's get Deadpool in the mix. Let's get Moon Knight in the mix.
Yeah,
we know the Avengers are in this world. Doctor Strange is in this world.
The Spider-Verse has blown things wide open.
Yes.
So they could do almost anything.
Yes. Before we go, I did want to ask you a couple questions about some of your other projects, because as I mentioned before, you do a lot of work with video games in particular. Recently, here at the time we're recording this, you just had an appearance as Smoke in Mortal Kombat 1.
Yes.
If I'm correct, you've never been in a Mortal Kombat game before this, if I am right? So what was it like joining the Mortal Kombat universe? How did you feel about playing Smoke? Did you have any input with how that character was developed? And most curiously, I would love to know how those like pre-fight kind of snips at other characters come together, and what that's like, because that's my favorite part of those games when it comes to the writing.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. I was never in a Mortal Kombat game, but I was in a fairly recent DC animated.
Okay.
I played Cobra in a DC animated Mortal Kombat movie, which doesn't count as being part of the Mortal Kombat universe in a game. I was never a big Mortal Kombat player, so a lot of this, when I came into it, was new to me. So when I was like, oh, so Smoke's this new character, and they're like, no, he's not a new character. I'm like, oh. So then I had to go back and do my research, and I'm like, oh, okay, so he hasn't been in for a while, and he's coming back. Got it. So it's super, and yet, even though I wasn't a big Mortal Kombat player, it's not like I didn't know what Mortal Kombat was. Everybody knows what Mortal Kombat is. And I've been playing video games since you had to pump quarters into them, and Mortal Kombat's been around for a long time. And when it came out, nobody else was doing what they're doing, and still to this at this point, still nobody's doing what they're doing, which is super exciting. I love how much more story I felt that they, were putting in these games than I assumed were in just, a fighting game. And you're right, those quips, Dominic Cianciolo, was the writer that I worked with on this, he was always really good in the session about giving context, and letting us find humor where there was humor, and to cut it out when it didn't need to be, and to explain relationships and histories between different characters when I was paired up with one person versus another person, making it more jovial if I was faced off against somebody who's actually kind of on my side, and it's more of a a playful fight than it still ends with somebody's spine getting ripped out, but rather than somebody who our families have always been on opposite sides, and it's so it was really fun going into that, and so it was great. It was super playful. It was fun. Working with Dominic was great. Andrew, who plays Johnny Cage, is always hilarious, and he's got to be my favorite just because I've known Andrew for a long time, and I would, it was easy for me to picture, him and just to hear him in my head when we would do those scenes together, or not together, as it were.
How do they pitch I don't know if you've done the recordings for this yet, but how do they pitch the like DLC fighters to you where things get really outlandish? Like, okay, this next quip is for John Cena's version of Peacemaker, and you're gonna say this.
Right, exactly. Well, luckily, I'm a nerdy nerd and like know those characters already, and have watched Peacemaker, and I watch The Boys, and I watch Invincible, so like they didn't have to like sell me on any of those characters or explain who any of them were, which certainly helped things.
The next game I wanted to ask you about is something that's coming out next year, and is Persona 3 Reload. I know you have been in the past Persona games. I'm a big Persona fan. It's one of my favorite franchises.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the series. I know there was a little bit of divisiveness amongst the community earlier this year when it was announced that the original actors like yourself were not going to be coming back for the remake in their previous roles. I'm curious just how that decision made you feel, and two, there was kind of an outpouring of support for you guys afterwards, just like we're going to get new voice actors, but the originals are still there. We still love them. Like, what was that experience like for you, and what did you think about that?
Well, I loved how much support there was, and but I also understand the decision to put a fresh coat of paint on something, and to if we're sort of starting over again, to start fresh in some cases. Did I love playing in that world and playing those characters? Sure. Would I've wanted to do again? Yeah. But I get it. You're always disappointed not to come back as something that that you love doing. But I also understand those decisions. The support is great. But I also loved that the people that I know who are coming in to play those roles are awesome. Like Alex Le, who's coming in to play, depending on how you know him, the protagonist Makoto or Minato. He goes by many names, and people are very specific about what we call him. But I think I think Alex is awesome, and a great fit for that, and I know it's going to be great. But I certainly appreciate the support. I love that people have loved that game so much. It goes back to the whole Peter face switch thing. I love that people love it so much that they're upset for something to change. But I also understand things changing. You can't fight that.
Will you still have involvement with the project at all, perhaps in a different role? Because I know in previous trailers, some eagle-eared fans have picked up on your voice perhaps appearing in a different capacity. So are you still tied to that project, just not playing Makoto this time around?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still included in there, and they wanted to include, as much as possible, original voice actors. And in some cases, not everybody is recast. Like for example, my wife, Tara Platt, who played 2 roles in that, it was just announced that she's coming back as Elizabeth, which is a character which is reprising her role from the previous game. So it's we're I think most of us, I don't know what all the decisions were, but are still playing some role in it, even if this time I'm the dad, which is okay, because that was 15 years ago. I don't know, and I'm older now, so I get it.
You've graduated from a high schooler to a father character now.
Exactly.
Is what's going on.
Which is fine, because I've become a father since the first game, so I'm feeling it in my
art imitates life. There you go.
Exactly.
Yuri, that's all the questions I had for you. Again, thank you so much for joining me and sitting down here and going through a bunch of this stuff. It was a real treat to talk to you. I'm excited for everybody else to play Spider-Man too, like I'm sure you are here in the coming days.
I just want it to be out there, and I guess today it finally is.
For sure.
So thank you, Logan.
Thank you so much, Yuri. It was great to talk to you.